Hello, UTI camp. How is everyone feeling today? I know this is getting close to the end of your final day of the conference, so I hope you're all still awake. And it's a Saturday, you can relax tonight. It'll be fun. All right, so my presentation now, why being nice can be an extremely effective business strategy. Now, I have to be brutally honest, the cynical part of me, when I look at a title like this, I just have to roll my eyes. It's so lame, it hurts. Go hug a tree, you bleeding heart liberal. Um, so often when I see examples of companies taking a lead on social issues and showing just how gosh darn hard they care, I get these little alarm bells ringing in my head and I want to loudly call bullshit. And I'm sure there's some people here who can relate to this, or at least to some of it. Business consultancy jargon can be banal at the best of times and brain numbing at the worst. One of the most pervasive terms from my time at university here in the Netherlands was the concept of corporate social responsibility, which we came to understand as a public relations tool, which is used by big multinationals to drum up a little bit of good press to try and offset all the mountains of bad press that they deserve to be getting. The concept of corporate social responsibility, that businesses should both self-regulate and benefit their communities, goes back to before the 1800s. In America at the time, states had the right to invalidate a business's license to operate if they were found to be doing something irresponsible or acting against the public's sort of needs or wants. Now, I'm not going to advocate for an 1800 style American corporate social responsibility policy. I'm not going to advocate for a 2021 American corporate social responsibility program. But I do want to look at why the idea of corporate social responsibility triggers such a jaded response from people. In this presentation, I'm going to look at why so many people are cynical of companies that profess to be doing everything they can to progress their corporate social responsibility agenda. I'm going to explore what cynicism is and why people are so susceptible to it. And finally, I'm going to look at what we can do as individuals to step back from the creative black hole that is full-time cynicism while maintaining a healthy degree of skepticism. And I'm also going to explain the difference between cynicism and skepticism. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Hickson. I'm the marketing manager at a Dutch multilingual communication company, Ludeo. If you sat through my talk yesterday, you'll know that I have a bit of an obsession with history and trivia and the etymology of words and phrases. And for those of you who were at the talk yesterday, if there are any of you there today from yesterday, in yesterday's talk, I tried to show an example. I tried to allow you to experience the curse of knowledge, where somebody knows something and they assume the other people can know that as well. Ironically, during that display, I didn't realize that you couldn't hear the audio that I was trying to play. So, if you bear with me for 1 second, for those of you who were listening yesterday and you're curious as to what song I was trying to tap out, it was this. And again, I'm assuming you can hear this. I don't know. Let's move on. Okay, are you familiar with the phrase bleeding heart? I said it at the start. Go hug a tree, you bleeding heart liberal. Well, the phrase bleeding heart, it's used to describe someone who shows excessive sympathy for another's misfortune and is historically thrown as an insult towards more liberal politicians. The first half of the 20th century saw increased use of bleeding heart as a term of derision. One of the most prominent writers to seize on the phrase was an American journalist named Westbrook Pegler. Now, Pegler was a vocal critic of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, the policies, and particularly the administration's support for organized labor. In a 1938 column, he took on the subject of lynching. Now, lynching, without doing the full graphic for the whole thing, lynching it was in the US where a black man was hung from a tree by some mob. So lynching, not a subject you want to be defending. But Pegler wrote an article in 1938 criticizing the debate surrounding anti-lynching laws as being time-killing, regarding lynching as a concern of local governments and not one addressed effectively at a national level. I question humanitarianism of any professional or semi-pro bleeding heart who clamours that not one single person must be allowed to hunger, but would stall the entire legislative programme if in a fight to hand through a law intended at the most optimistic figure to save 14 lives a year, he wrote. Pegler's views became more conservative throughout the years after that, and he continued to employ bleeding heart as a term of derision throughout FDR's term and throughout the Truman administration. The term was then picked up by Senator Joe McCarthy, known in the US for his crusades to identify and remove suspected communists from within government ranks, and particularly for his attacks on CBS newsman Edward R. Murrow. Now, Bleeding Heart has found a comfortable home in conservative rhetoric, as it simultaneously accused ideological opponents of being both driven by emotion, often for unjust causes, and often weighted by hypocrisy, since some causes drew more concern than others. It's the whole whataboutism that we see in politics now. Now, I wasn't trying to be lame when I came up for the title of this presentation, why being nice can be an extremely effective business strategy. It genuinely just came out that way. But I know very few people who are eternally positive or constantly upbeat. And to be honest, I don't think I could trust anyone who is eternally sunny. I'd be waiting for them to crack. In my proposal for this presentation, I quoted Charles Dickens. The first rule of business is do other men for they would do you. And there are many different variations of this phrase, the whole all's fair in love and war, or we had a rugby captain for the Irish team in the 1970s, this man, Willie John McBride, and his most famous saying, I don't know if it's actually his, but it's attributed to him in Ireland. He used to say, get your retaliation in first. So, don't wait to be screwed over, do them first. Which I thought was fantastic. It was very, very funny. In rugby terms, it's great. You hammer them first. In business and life in general, not so great. It's really easy to be cynical. You just need to look at some of the strategies that have been used by politicians and corporations over the years to see why people would become increasingly jaded and disillusioned. So let's first look at some of the reasons for this cynicism. The public... Well, the reality is the public has every right to be skeptical. For years, the notion of corporate social responsibility has been exploited by irresponsible corporations as a tool to maximize profits, whilst failing really to uphold their claims. As possibly not the most famous, I don't know, let's just call it an infamous example of this. In the 1980s, the multinational energy corporation Chevron spent millions on an ad campaign presenting themselves as an environmentally friendly company, whilst simultaneously destroying the world and breaking regulations everywhere with their business practices. The adverts have since become notorious as an archetypal example of greenwashing, the term by which the practice of boasting environmentally responsible credentials, whilst in reality not only failing to live up to, but actively contradicting these claims, became to be known. By the close of the 1990s, the claims, and as claims similar to Chevron's were increasingly exposed to be simply untrue, the concerns surrounding environmental and social responsibility were heightened. The term greenwashing entered the Oxford English Dictionary and the mainstream lexicon. Now, I'm going to move on to cynics and the dictionary definition of what is a cynic. Modern cynics believe that people are motivated wholly by self-interest. But the first cynics, those members of the ancient Greek philosophical sect the word cynic comes from, they believed that virtue was the only good and that it could be achieved through poverty and self-sufficiency. So how did we get to the pursuit of virtue? Sorry, how did we get from the pursuit of virtue to the cynical eye roll? Well, the word cynic comes from the Greek kunikos, meaning like a dog. And that name comes from Kounasarges, the gymnasium where one of the early cynics taught. Its name is translated variously as white dog or quick dog or even dog meat. Or it may have come from Diogenes, the cynic who really set the movement going, who was known for barking his beliefs, among other dog-like behaviors. Now, the Cynics embraced the name and its implications that they were like 4th century BC Athenian dogs, which by association were likely not fixed and definitely not trained, because the Cynics, they sure as hell weren't. They rejected social conventions, all social conventions, and the very notion of shame. And they were not quiet about it. Diogenes rejected social conventions and declared that whatever was natural and easy could not be indecent and therefore should be done in public. And he was known for doing the most private deeds in public, as dogs do. I'll let your imaginations play with what those deeds might have been. He also lived outside in a tub. But the English word for cynic was first used in the 16th century to refer to the Greek Cynics. English speakers apparently didn't think too highly of the Cynics, though, because in a few decades they were using cynic to mean any fault-finding critic, especially one who thinks people are motivated wholly by self-interest. The semantic leap is probably quite unfair to the Greek Cynics, who seem to have been more about living according to their ideals than about making sweeping generalizations about human motivations. Now, maybe in tribute to the Greek Cynics, we could convince modern ones to replace their sneers with a little tail wagging every now and then, or get people to have a go to live in a tub for a while. But it's probably easier not to try going down that road too far. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines cynic as one who believes that human conduct is motivated wholly by self-interest. This should not be confused with skeptic, as defined by the same dictionary as to have an attitude of doubt. Mirvis and Cantor, in a paper in 1989, were careful throughout their work to remind us that cynicism is different to skepticism. Skepticism is a healthy response to work and life. Skeptics are open to change. Cynics aren't. So how do we avoid becoming crippled by cynicism? What is the antidote to cynicism? Well, be curious. Look deeper and ask questions. The philosopher Nora O'Neill once declared, well-placed trust grows out of active inquiry rather than blind acceptance. And that seems right. If we want to be able to trust the world around us, we need to show an interest and ask basic questions. And despite all the confusions of the modern world, it's never been easier to find answers to those questions. Curiosity, it turns out, can be a remarkably powerful thing. A little over a decade ago, a Yale University researcher, Dan Kahan, showed students some footage of a protest outside an unidentified building. Now, some of the students were told it was a pro-life demonstration outside an abortion clinic. Others were informed that it was a gay rights demonstration outside an army recruitment office. The students were asked some factual questions. Was it a peaceful protest? Did the protesters try to intimidate people passing by? Did they scream or shout? Did they block the entrance to the building? And the answers they gave depended on the political identities that they embraced. Conservative students who believed they were looking at a demonstration against abortion saw no problems with the protest. No abuse, no violence, no obstruction. Students on the left who thought they were looking at a gay rights protest reached the same conclusion. The protesters had conducted themselves with dignity and restraint. But right-wing students who thought they were looking at a gay rights demonstration reached a very different conclusion, as did the left-wing students who believed they were watching an anti-abortion protest. Both of these groups concluded that the protesters had been aggressive, they had been intimidating, and they had been obstructive. Kahan was studying a rather universal problem in this day and age, Jesus, very much so now. The way our political and cultural identity, our desire to belong to a community of like-minded, right-thinking people, can, on certain hot-button issues, lead us to reach conclusions that we wish to reach. Depressingly, not only do we reach politically comfortable conclusions when parsing complex statistical claims on issues such as climate change, we reach politically comfortable conclusions regardless of the evidence in front of you, in front of your eyes. Expertise is no guarantee against this kind of motivated reasoning. In the US, again, I apologize for constantly referencing to the US, but it's a hobby horse of mine. I'm Irish, but I'm fascinated by US politics. It's a really, really slow car crash, but it's fascinating to watch. In the US, Republicans and Democrats with high levels of scientific literacy are further apart on climate change than those with little scientific education. The same disheartening pattern holds for nuclear power, gun control, and everything up to gay rights. The more scientifically literate opponents are, the more they disagree. Kahan and his colleagues stumbled upon a trait that some people have and that other people can be encouraged to develop, which inoculates us against this toxic polarization. On the most politically polluted tribal questions where intelligence and education fail, this trait doesn't. And if you're desperately, burningly curious to know what it is, congratulations, you may be inoculated already. Curiosity breaks this relentless pattern. The more curious we are, the less our tribalism seems to matter. Now, there's little correlation between scientific curiosity and political affiliation. And scientific curiosity is very different to scientific literacy. Happily, there are plenty of curious people across the political spectrum. Curiosity is as an antidote to cynicism and tribalism makes sense. One of our most stubborn defenses against changing our minds is that we're good at filtering out or dismissing unwelcome information. A curious person, however, enjoys being surprised, and they hunger for the unexpected. He or she will not be filtering out surprising news because it's far too intriguing. The scientifically curious people that Kahan's team studied were originally identified with simple questions buried deep in a marketing survey, so the people weren't conscious that their curiosity was being measured. One question, for example, was, how often do you read science books? This is a sweeping generalization, but scientifically curious people are more interested in watching a documentary about space travel or penguins or the wind flow in a certain part of the world rather than watching a basketball game or football game or some celebrity gossip, Love Island bullshit. And they didn't just answer the survey questions differently. They also made different choices in the psychology lab. In one experiment, participants were shown a range of headlines on climate change, and they were invited to pick the most interesting article to read. Now, there were 4 headlines. 2 suggested climate skepticism and 2 did not. 2 were framed as surprising and 2 were not. So the first headline, Scientists find still more evidence that global warming actually slowed in the last decade. Skeptical and unsurprising. The second headline, scientists report surprising evidence. Arctic ice melting even faster than expected. Surprising, not skeptical. Number 3, scientists report surprising evidence. Ice increasing in Antarctic, not currently contributing to sea level rise. Skeptical and surprising. And number 4, scientists find still more evidence linking global warming to extreme weather. Neither surprising nor skeptical. Typically, you'd expect people to reach for the article that pandered to their prejudices. Liberals would tend to favour a headline that took global warming seriously, whilst conservatives would prefer to read something with a skeptical tone or something dismissive. Scientifically curious people, liberal or conservative, were different. They were happy to grab an article which ran counter to their preconceptions, as long as it seemed surprising and fresh. Now, once you're actually reading the article, there's always the chance that it might teach you something. A surprising statistical claim is a challenge to our existing worldview. It may provoke an emotional response, even a fearful one. Neuroscientific studies suggest that the brain responds in much the same way to facts that threaten our preconceptions as it does to wild animals, which literally threaten your life. Yet for someone with a curious frame of mind, in contrast, a surprising claim need not provoke anxiety. It can be an engaging mystery or puzzle to solve. Now, can we cultivate curiosity? Can we become more curious? Can we inspire curiosity in others? There are reasons to believe that the answers to these questions are yes. One reason, according to Kahan, is that his measure of curiosity suggests that incremental change is possible. When he measured scientific curiosity, he doesn't find a lump of stubbornly incurious people at one end of the spectrum and a lump of voraciously curious people at the other end with a yawning gap in the middle. Instead, curiosity follows a continuous bell curve. Most people are either moderately curious or moderately incurious. This doesn't prove that curiosity can be cultivated, but it does at least hold out hope that people can be nudged a little further towards the curious end of the curve, because no radical leap is required. A second reason is that curiosity is often situational, and in the right place at the right time, curiosity will smolder in any of us. Indeed, Kahan's discovery that an individual scientific curiosity persisted over time was a surprise to some psychologists. They had believed, with some reason, that there was no such thing as a curious person, just a situation that inspired curiosity. In fact, it does now seem that they can tend to be curious or incurious. That does not alter the fact that curiosity can be fueled or dampened by context. We all have it in us to be curious or not about different things at different times. One thing that provokes curiosity is a sense that there's a gap in our knowledge that needs to be filled. George Lowenstein, a behavioral economist at Carnegie Mellon University, framed this idea in what has become known as the information gap theory of curiosity. As Lowenstein puts it, curiosity starts to glow when there's a gap between what we know and what we want to know. There's a sweet spot for curiosity. If we know nothing, we don't ask questions. What's the point? If we know everything, we ask no questions either. Again, what's the point? Curiosity is filled once we know enough to know that we don't know. However, all too often, we don't even think about what we don't know. So, if curiosity is the cure for cynicism, how can we become more curious people? How can we encourage our staff and our colleagues to become more curious people? Okay, I have 7 tips which might help you along that path. Number one, it's already been mentioned, ask questions. Try as we might, it's impossible to have all the answers all the time. And while it's easy to default to assumptions when faced with a challenging unknown, it's better to work through the knowledge gaps by asking questions. When we ask questions, we're creating an opportunity to discover new, useful information that can be used to challenge our existing approach. Expand your vision, spark fresh ideas. Questioning allows us to become more insightful. It also stops us from assuming that we do have all the answers. According to the cognitive psychologist Gary Klein, people who get insights see something that is a little bit off, and instead of ignoring it, they're curious about it. Curiosity keeps our minds engaged to work out the implications. Number two, consume content that's outside your comfort zone. I've spent years giving out about DJs. I think I love bands. I love live music. I love going to concerts. There's nothing more annoying than seeing a DJ standing behind his decks, jumping up and down like he's done something. You're pressing buttons. That was my opinion. It's still kind of my opinion, but I never realized how much there was to learn about DJing and mixing songs until I had to put together a playlist for the T Update conference back in April. And I had to learn about beats per minute, the BPM, and how to fade in and fade out without losing the beat, and how to keep the music going. It's funny how that works, isn't it? When we don't have any initial knowledge about something, we're not really curious about it until we have to be. As Lowenstein suggested, curiosity does in fact require some initial knowledge. In other words, the more we know, the more we want to know. So if you're looking to become a bit more curious, you might want to try tapping into a subject matter you don't know much about, whether you focus on productivity habits, Egyptian pyramids, beer brewing, tourist locations, battlefields in Western Europe. It's entirely up to you. Whatever you want to dig into, go for it. The important thing is that the content is unfamiliar. Basic research will spur you to want to do more. Listen without judgment. Curious people are often considered good listeners and conversationalists, according to Ben Dean, a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. By suspending judgment, you're ultimately allowing yourself to be more receptive to what someone is saying. You're focusing less on what you're going to say next and more on the words and information that they're choosing to tell you. Or what sometimes can be just as important, the words and phrases that they're choosing not to express to you. So next time you're having a conversation with someone, just listen. When you take time to truly absorb what they're saying, it'll be easier for you to formulate questions. You can warm up to a new perspective. You might be able to see things better from their point of view. And you may have learned something new that you could have otherwise missed. Embrace the unexpected. Given the last 18 months that we've had, this should be a mantra for every company in the world. Embrace the unexpected. Embrace change. Many people find themselves plagued by their own self-doubts, which cause them to miss out on new places, new flavors, new people, new experiences. But oftentimes doing something unexpected can trigger a chain of reactions, both positive and negative, that you can learn from and you can formulate questions based on. If you're too busy worrying about the what ifs, you're shutting yourself off from the types of unexpected opportunities. So, go ahead. When it's safe to, book that ticket and travel somewhere new. Go on a blind date. Go to a restaurant that you've never ordered something from the menu that you don't have a clue what it is. You can't even pronounce it. Try stuff. Research reveals that surprise can actually drive our motivation to learn. So embrace the unexpected. Celebrate whatever the outcome. I know that can be a very hard one for people to do because we're hardwired to be resistant to change. But if the last 18 months have taught you nothing, we really have to get beyond that tension, that willingness to stay where we are to be safe. Just break out. this is Jay. This is different. This is weird. But I'm enjoying actually talking to you guys and being able to connect with people doing this. Finally, not finally, number 5, try not to dwell on the past. Now, the presentation yesterday was about building up a failure resume or keeping track of all of your mistakes. The point of that, keeping track of them, it doesn't mean that you go back and you dwell on them and you're reminded of them all the time. The failure resume has got to have an emotional detachment. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. When you spend all your time worrying about the past, you don't give yourself a chance to be curious about the future. So rather than worrying about what could have, what would have, what should have, what you could have or should have done with your last assignment, try to focus on strategies for blowing your next assignment out of the water. Learn from your mistakes and move onwards and upwards. What new opportunities are there for you to explore? Is there anyone in your network who can help you get better at X, Y, Z, whatever you want? What conferences can you attend to expand your understanding of the industry that you work in, the people that work around you? What I enjoy about these conferences is I get to hear what's happening in MT. I get to hear what's happening for project managers. I love the fact that right now there's a watercolors task going on. If there's anyone here, I have to question, why are you here? That sounds like a lot of fun. But focus on what's to come, not what's already happened. Another 6 and 7. 6, gamify learning. If you tend to view it as dull and boring but tedious, you're probably fine training yourself to be more curious. It's not going to be that easy. As you'd imagine, this is a problem that many teachers are forced to overcome when dealing with unmotivated students. To inspire curiosity and excitement, many teachers turn to gamification in the classroom. And why does it work? Well, games make us more curious, more determined, more optimistic, because they allow us to try and try again without having to worry about failure, which helps to keep you motivated to keep going. If you're having trouble staying curious about a subject, try turning your research into a game. We do this with our project managers at Ludeo, where each week they have a certain amount of time allocated to games and tests on Slido, basically just to keep them sharp on their knowledge of certain clients, certain brands, or certain jobs that they're working in, or just the general overall job of a project manager. They all go in there, they all have a little bit of time each week, and it's just a way to keep them up to date with clients and just to keep them sharp. Number 7, change your perspective on a situation. Not the easiest thing to do, but rather than rest on your laurels when it comes to making decisions or planning projects, allow yourself to view the situation from the perspective of a stranger, or better yet, your buyer persona. What would they suggest? What concerns would they have? What challenges do they face? Then look at the situation through the eyes of your competitor, or of your boss, or of somebody in your team, somebody from a different country in your team. You just continue the exercise. When we're curious about others and talk to people outside our usual social circles, we become better able to understand those with lives, experiences, and worldviews different than our own. More curiosity and empathy is a good thing. It can go a long way to making you a better marketer, a better leader, and without wanting to go all lame again, it could make you a better human. We have to be responsible for our own curiosity. As the saying goes, only boring people get bored. The world is so much more interesting if we take an active interest in it. There's another old saying that goes, the cure for boredom is curiosity. There's no cure for curiosity. So if I go back to the opening statement, the title of my presentation this evening, why being nice can be an extremely effective business strategy. To truly convince the cynics, a company's corporate social responsibility brand must be absolutely central and at the heart of your business, rather than simply a ploy to maximize profit or distract from less desirable truths. There are many companies that I think put social political issues, they use them to gain traction in certain markets or to create a buzz around the brand. Pepsi had their infamous video featuring Kendall Jenner. I talked to the interpreters early in the week. They were familiar with this ad, so this slide's a bit silly. Look, Google Pepsi Kendall Jenner ad. They basically took a Black Lives March and showed that Pepsi can solve everything, and it was just disgraceful. It's an awful ad, but they did it to capitalize on the buzzworthiness of the whole thing. For far too long, being nice has been mistaken for being weak. In reality, niceness is a necessary quality of leadership for the world that we're living in. It's become so rare that when someone does a kind act, or they go out of their way to do something nice for someone, it goes viral on social media. Being nice doesn't mean that you can't make hard decisions or stand up to difficult people. It just means that you're respectful, you're kind, and you show empathy to your employees. When kindness isn't modeled in the workplace, we find ourselves in an environment that is unhealthy and at worst can be toxic. Today, people are clamoring for a more human style of leadership. In an age of automation and AI, leaders' hard skills are easily being replicated by smart technology. What makes the difference in effective leadership are the soft skills. But it has to be authentic. It can't be performative. You can't do it with the thought in the back of your head that this is going to make an epic post on social media. Now, you don't need to become a bleeding heart liberal to be nice in business. The way you treat others shows your values and true character. You can't influence others if you aren't authentic. Employees, partners, colleagues, customers, potential customers, they're all looking at you as a leader to determine if they can trust you. In my experience, tough and nice don't have to be incompatible. Just deal with people, whoever they are, like they're humans. It is people that we're dealing with. It's not statistical. It's not statistics on a graph. They're not just numbers. Everyone can have shitty days. Everyone can have really, really bad off days. And you never know what someone else is dealing with. So you need to take that into account. And everyone can be susceptible to cynicism. We need to encourage people to be open-minded. But as Professor Walter Koching said at Holyoke College in 1940 in a speech, keep your minds open, but not so open that your brains fall out. Encourage people around you to maintain a healthy degree of skepticism. If you read a headline in a newspaper or you see a tweet that causes you to feel an emotion, whether that's rage or righteousness, take a step back, count to 10, take a time out, go, realize that someone is trying to manipulate you. Take a moment before you retweet or comment or say something about it and ask yourself, why am I feeling this? Who wants me to feel this? Is it just because it supports or contradicts my preconceived biases? I would like to think that a policy of sustainability built on kindness, or as the students of the philosopher Richard Brooks would say, the don't be a dick school of thought, it can be an effective method to achieving greater visibility in a crowded marketplace. It can help gain respect from peers and clients, and it can leave a positive impression. And it can be achieved without huge costs, and indeed it can actually drive revenue streams. It's also a tool which can be used to drive team spirit and help improve team morale. Cynicism is a black hole for creativity and emotional connections. Curiosity is a muscle which can be honed and trained and put to work, driving your company forward. Skepticism is a healthy defense mechanism. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. It was amazing. A lot of food for thoughts, a lot of really valuable information and examples to follow. And thank you for for these insights, and I hope maybe we have some questions from the audience. No, you're welcome. No, no questions. No questions.
It's been a long few days. I'd be amazed if anyone's got too much energy
it's
left.
before last. You've got one. Sorry, I didn't. Leonid, I'm sorry.
Probably I was too close. Okay. Yeah, I was too close. So
Hey,
my
Leonid.
question is, the only person I know very well, much better than the others, is myself. My question is, how does it combine? Because I'm both a cynical person and an extremely curious person. Thanks.
I think it's a great question, and I know it's something that I struggle with very much as well. I would consider myself quite a cynical person. Genuinely, I'll see things, people being nice, and it might genuinely be nice, but there's a part of me, this little voice in the back of my head. I think it's the two angels idea, or the devil and the angel. You need to train the angel, to train the curiosity. I don't think we should turn off the well. I think what we need to do is be very careful in the words that we use. We keep using the word cynical when I think we mean skeptical. And skepticism is healthy, to be a little bit judging about things. Cynicism is just, I don't care what you do. You're doing it, whatever you do, whatever any company does or any other person does, they're doing it for themselves. So fuck them, basically. The skeptic can look at it and you can kind of see where, if they are doing it for a genuine reason or not. The curious person can look at what they do, how they do it, and see if it's something you want to maybe try as well. I think everyone has those two, the devil and the angel, and I think we need to train up the angel to be more curious and to be more the driver, and then we need to train up the other side to be a skeptic rather than a cynic.
Thank you, Andrew. And I don't think actually Leonid is cynical. He takes his critical thinking for cynicism, but it's not. Sure. We have another question.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for your presentation. It brings a lot of hope, actually. I have a question to your presentation. So how do you respond nicely, especially in a corporate environment, but not only, even to your direct client, if you're addressed aggressively? For example, I remember in a corporate environment that my work was labeled as "what the fuck." So I was really stuck afterwards, and after a while I really left the company. So how do you respond nicely to that? Thank you.
It's a great question, and it's a shitty situation to be put into. It happens all the time, and it happens in every. Okay, I work in marketing. I'm the marketing manager for Ludea. My whole team are creatives. So stereotypically, we're seen as being a little bit more sensitive to criticism. And so when it comes to getting feedback, giving feedback within the team, what I tell them is, no matter how personal the feedback or the criticism feels or sounds, remember that person is attacking you from their child voice. They've gone into their it's not an adult conversation. They're talking to you from a child position, and now it's your responsibility to take that child's information and go, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I think X, Y, Z, and I think it could be approached differently. So the easy answer is, if you have the possibility to have a little bit of distance, physically and in time, between getting that kind of feedback, take a deep breath and just go, okay, they don't like it, that's fine, let's move on. Your initial reaction, and I think my initial reaction to getting that kind of feedback would be, well, fuck you too. But you need to swallow it, you need to think about it for a second and just ground yourself and just go, okay, they might be having, whoever gave you that feedback, they could be having the worst day of their lives. You don't know what situation they're going through. And the worst thing you can do is to bark back. You need to just, go with the adult voice and just kind of go, okay, I understand how you feel. I don't agree with you. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. If we can talk about it, give me a call. If not, thank you for your time and take care.
Yeah, thank you for the answer and for the question. Sorry, what's your name? Yeah, hi, Patricia. Actually, I think this situation is not the issue of you to be nice, but the issue of them not to be nice. Next time you get in this situation, hope it doesn't happen, but next time you can send a link to Andrew's speech to your client. All the records are available for free on YouTube channel, so feel free to give them this presentation, nice presentation, as an answer. So thank you very much, Andrew, one more time. Hope
No
to see
problem.
you
Thank
next
you very
time,
much.
maybe in person here in our UT camp. Yeah. And good luck.
I will keep my fingers and my toes and my eyes crossed, and I would love to be with you next year.